Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up, everyone? I am your host, Charlie Shrem, and you're listening to another epic episode of the Charlie Shrem Show, where together, twice a week, we get to dive deep with some of crypto's most influential leaders, Bitcoin OGs, those building on layer ones, layer twos, layer threes, creating all these new technologies, the cool products that we get to use today. Like, there are so many cool products that are being launched that you guys are hearing about on the show, but you're out in crypto land, products and services, cool companies, things you can do that are relaunching and building, that are taking like all of the mistakes that we made in the last few years, and we're like looking back on ourselves and we're saying, how can we do this better? How can we actually do DeFi? How can we actually do decentralization? How can we do cool things on Bitcoin? There's a lot of cool things happening. People are seeing like ordinals or whatever. Um, and I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Jane Mott. Jane, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
There's a you're what you're doing right now at zkLend is really forward thinking, but not just that. It's like you're using some of the newest technologies that are being launched like on a day-to-day basis. This is not like you're using with zkLend older technologies and protocols. It's like you're constantly having to build out um, um, your company on top of some of these some of these technologies that break sometimes. And we saw
Yeah.
that in the DeFi world, that we were like kind of, and I kind of like go back to a year or two ago, we were hodgepodging and very fast and quickly, I guess, putting together all these different protocols and different things, but it broke, and we saw like with a lot of the defaults on institutional DeFi protocols, we saw flaws in existing processes, like especially when it comes to the monitoring of money, of moving money around, going from rehypothecating certain assets on top of each other. But at the same time, these resets that we had, they expose weaknesses in the current systems, while also encouraging the growth of new ideas like yours. So you have zkLend, which is, in my opinion, you have this really cool company, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself and introduce what you're doing. But do you, I guess, like while you're introducing yourself, how is zkLend different than what we had a year or two ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with an introduction first. I'm Jane, and I'm one of the co-founders for zkLend. And I'm really excited to be here to chat. I mean, I guess all things DeFi and maybe institutional DeFi with you. And just a quick introduction about our product. zkLend is a lending protocol that we are building on top of Starknet, which is one of the newer layer two solutions out there. That utilizes zk rollups, and happy to go more into detail on zk rollups and why we think that they are the future of Ethereum scaling. But at its core, our product has two approaches. One is a retail product that does borrow and lend for anyone who wishes to connect to the protocol, deposit over collateralized assets, and take out a loan. So if you have 100 USDC, you want to deposit it, earn a yield, great. If you want to deposit, earn a yield, and maybe use it as collateral to borrow some wrapped BTC, you could also do that. And then on the other hand, we also have an institutional product. And our institutional product is, in some ways, it works a lot like the retail product, except there is a permission side to it. So if you are a VC, a market maker, and you actually want to borrow money, you can do that over collateralized like every retail user and just use our permissionless product. But sometimes you may also look to borrow under collateralized, or you might have collateral that is off chain, or you might have collateral that is not liquid. Um, and so the idea is we want to enable these guys to be able to borrow on the terms that they wish to, but also allow retail users to contribute and lend to these guys and earn a higher yield in return because of the risk that they are taking.
How do you connect off-chain assets to provide that are like generally illiquid, and those like paths to liquidity are very difficult, like bankruptcy claims or real estate or anything like that? How do you connect that into like an on-chain product?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're talking about off-chain, there are a couple folds. You can talk about, I guess, even like NFTs, right? I guess they're not an off-chain product per se,
Yeah.
but they are some illiquid products that may be hard to value or maybe hard for traditional lending protocols to take as collateral. We actually want to down the line actually want to be able to say, hey, actually, maybe you have a CryptoPunk, or you might have a
Yeah.
BYAC. And we want to be able to say, okay, we'll take it as collateral. I mean, obviously, it would be at a much lower collateralization factor. But again, it's about enabling composability and enabling people to say, hey, it's not just about depositing, the BTC, ETH, and using it as collateral.
That whole world of connecting real world assets and on-chain, off-chain is, I think, where a lot of the regulations are going to come from. So it's kind of really interesting that you've split your products in a very unique way. So you have the fully permissionless, decentralized product that just exists out there in crypto land. You deliver the technology, you launch it, you constantly are updating it, but it's permissionless. And I'm assuming, are there like DAO holders that kind of govern that product?
Yes, yes. Eventually, we do
That's so
want to
cool.
move to a DAO setup, but to be very honest, we are still in early days. And Charlie, when you asked me how off-chain assets would work, I think that is the ultimate goal. But right now, we are still looking to implement our very first part of our vision, which is the retail product.
But that's important that it was split up, because if you lumped it all together into this like epic protocol, uh, that's where you kind of run into issues right now, because you almost like have to move very slowly within. Is that that's the Apollo product, correct?
Yeah, so the institutional product is the Apollo
You have to
product.
like move slowly with the institutional product, because you're in lockstep with compliance and regulations, but you can really go out and build and develop strongly, aggressively, and allow for testnet and launches on the decentralized product, because they're two both very different things. That's interesting, because a lot of the guests that I have end up like it's like one product, so they get almost like stuck in where they can't really do anything anymore.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the principle of why we decided to start two products because I mean my partner Brian he had actually worked at a bank and he understands a lot of the regulatory I guess issues or he foresees a lot of hurdles that we might run into as we launch our Apollo product, things like licensing, as you mentioned, claims. If any of the pools like if any of the players do not repay certain of these loans, how do we go to bankruptcy court or how do we actually
Yeah,
help users recoup some of these funds? And the reality is, with regulation, we don't have full control over what happens in the market at the time. So we don't want that to like kind of stop protocol development just because I don't know, like the case of FTX, right? Like institutions all suddenly stop borrowing, and that's
exactly.
our entire business.
You I want to like kind of switch a little bit into scaling, because I never really get
Yeah.
to cover this topic as much as I'd like to, and I want to go back in time a little bit to when you had big debates between on top of Bitcoin, with where that how that was going to scale. There was the block size wars, and that came down to like a question of decentralization. If you increase the block size, you potentially have it would cost it would cost a lot more money to run. You'd have nodes would need to be larger, blockchain size
Yeah.
would be larger, so you'd have less people running them, therefore less decentralization. And then on Ethereum, we saw debates for years of moving from proof of work to proof of stake for scalability reasons. We saw that happen, and then we saw uh, thousands of other blockchains launch that mimic Ethereum and Bitcoin in some sort of like hyper fast way. This is how we want to scale, like almost like these forks and offshoots, different things. A lot of them are growing very rapidly. A lot of them are EVM compatible to Ethereum, like you have like Polygon and some of those that are getting really popular. But you guys are hinging your scalability and your product on zero knowledge technology, which is very, very new. And I still don't fully understand it, rollups, and we're going to get into that in a second. But also, you're building on top of Starkware, which is also very new on top of Ethereum. What can you, if it's possible, teach us like Ethereum's vision or all blockchains vision for scaling? Like you have these different modular pieces that do different things and they have their own incentivization models. Like how do you know where to start?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll just start. Well, that's a heavy question, but
Sorry, I know it's what I'm thinking about, to be honest.
no, of course. Why don't I start with kind of what ZK rollups are and why they really help Ethereum scalability, right? I mean, the issue with Ethereum is come DeFi summer, back in 2018, 2019,
Yep.
there was such a large amount of transactions coming through. And the issue is congestion, right? The network couldn't hold or couldn't process this many transactions
Yeah.
in a short period of time. And gas fees started hiking up. So unless you were someone who had a lot of money, each transaction could come to like 10, 15 US dollars. So if I were transacting, I was making a swap on Uniswap for $100 USDC to ETH. My cost to transact was 10, 15% of what my transaction would be. And if I played around with it for a little bit longer, I might even lose all my money in gas before I get around to actually executing my strategy. And that's a huge issue, right, for blockchain scalability, because ultimately it isn't about just the institutions playing around. It should be about me and you, as well as every other small player out there. Well, I don't know if you're a small player, but I'm a small player out there.
Yeah.
And so, this is when kind of the scalability question comes in, right? Like, how does the blockchain stay decentralized? Because Ethereum is extremely decentralized with thousands of node operators. But each node operator actually needs to download every single transaction that comes in. And so there's also the data availability question that comes into play. And I guess this is my segue into rollup solutions. And basically what rollups do is they are like a layer 2 solution that combines hundreds of thousands of transactions on a separate chain, so to speak, or on a different layer. And all of this data actually sits in layer 2, but they generate a proof to be submitted and validated on layer 1. So on layer 1, instead of holding all the transaction data of everything, what you're basically holding is the ZK proof. So the proof to say, hey, actually all these transactions were executed correctly, as well as the state change. So what the ledger looks like, rather than the process of how every transaction was executed. Let me break it down a little bit more. So I was actually thinking about this today, and I was given a challenge at the gym actually, and the gym told me, okay, Jane, you need to do 10 minutes of planks, and record yourself doing
10
it.
minutes in one plank?
No, over like a course of like
Okay.
however many videos you want to do. And I did it, and I was thinking, like, crap, I hate the idea of recording myself, and I hate the idea I have to upload it into a group and prove that I've done something. What if I'm able to actually like prove that I've done these planks without having to upload a video, like some way to prove it? Or what if I can even prove that I've completed the challenge without telling you that the challenge was 10 minutes of planks? So basically, this is what
Yeah,
ZK proofs are.
it's
ZK
a great
proofs.
analogy. I'm going to use that. That's exactly what it is. But my question is then, if you don't know the question to be asked, then how do you know if the answer is good? Like what then in your example, how does the ZK, who is the one that's requesting the information? Is it you? Is it your trainer who wants to verify that you did the challenge so then they know what the challenge was and they can get a yes or a no? Is that
Yeah, I think maybe the question is just more so what, like who's like coming up with all these like cryptographic proofs. And I think this is where the moon math comes in, and this is where all the cryptographers and scientists come in. They help generate this cryptographic proof, which, to be honest, I'm not super familiar with how you generate a cryptographic proof.
yeah.
but they're basically telling you, hey, based on these constraints, I'm able to prove that these hundreds and thousands of transactions were executed properly. And once they generate this proof, they submit it on Ethereum layer one. And there is a validator to say, okay, these proofs were like, these proofs fit the criteria that we're looking for, and therefore we accept it as a valid transaction.
Ah, so it's like the computation doesn't need to be uploaded to like in your video example, the computation is happening locally, it's happening with you, but the method
Yeah.
in which the verification is happening, it's not technology that you could own and you could counterfeit it. It's technology that you're all agreeing to use and that you're using it and it's uploaded. And so that's a very good way. So it's in blockchain, especially when it comes to like smaller types of data transactions, a lot of the times you're just verifying if the data is there or if someone did something, like you said, if proof of work. You don't actually need a copy of all of the work downloaded. So ZK
Yeah.
rollups, it could potentially change everything because you wouldn't need millions of node operators to actually download a copy of the chain itself.
Yeah, or whoever's running a node on like Ethereum, for example, they wouldn't necessarily need to like download every single transaction that happens on layer two, but rather they're downloading kind of that compressed data, that proof that says everything's been executed properly.
Why is this important to you, to be honest? Like you mentioned before, like we're talking about DAOs, and you said, well, we're not there yet. We're on like a path. And anyone who listens to the show knows that I probably say this term, the path to decentralization, every show. Decentralization is a path, and the way you're doing it is the right way. Kind of like talking about a roadmap. This is where we are. This is where we're going to be. This is the future. And being decentralized is about in the ethos of what it means to be a Bitcoiner is transparency. So I would say that you're following the ethos of being a Bitcoiner because you're all about that path and being transparent. But why even be decentralized at all? I mean, if you have a permissioned product that could work really well, you're using blockchain technology, but you're making sure that everything works. But on the other end, if you have a fully decentralized product, I mean, it's at the whims of the token holders and the DAO holders and proposals, and there's like you're removing your ability to control everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I guess maybe to backtrack a little bit, the reason I say decentralization is still very much, or with DAOs, it's still very much a work in progress. And I do want to highlight this with our experience building on Starknet as well. Oftentimes we find ourselves in a pretty like, I don't want to say frustrating situation, but because we're building on a new chain, a lot of times the network's trying to optimize for performance. And they're trying to optimize for both performance and decentralization at the same time. So, for example, on the Starknet blockchain, we have provers and we have sequencers. Sequencers who basically order the transactions and then help execute it. And then once the transactions are executed, you have provers that basically generate that ZK proof that eventually gets submitted onto layer one. Now, in a I guess more developed network, you might have decentralized provers and decentralized sequencers. But in the early days of the network, you may still experience a lot of
Yep.
centralization that comes in. And so, I guess why decentralization matters. Going back to the point, I'm not an anarchist in the sense that I don't think everything's going to start out decentralized. I understand that there are inefficiencies that start out where you do require centralization to optimize for
Yeah.
performance before you start to decentralize. But I think ultimately, giving any one party too much power just corrupts them. That is my fundamental
Yeah.
ethos, which is why I believe that no matter how smart you are, no matter how great you are at developing technology, I think power just corrupts you, which is why decentralization to me matters.
It's so true. I learned that the hard way when I was uh 23 and I fell from like uh a huge point in my life. It was at a very high point and I walked around like, my butt didn't stink and I fell from grace and it took many, many, many years to rebuild trust and to rebuild life again. So there's definitely that there, and being responsible is huge. Being responsible is people don't realize that like our whole industry. Maybe I'm an alarmist, but we were hanging by a thread. I mean, the FTX, the institutional DeFi protocols, we talk about billions of dollars just wiping out. And then the biggest problem was like that you had protocols that were supposed to operate a certain way and protect other people's assets and do like margin calls and basically like, hey, if someone's defaulting on their loan, sell their other assets, but things just broke. Like a lot of
Yeah.
things that just didn't it broke. And here I'm out here like on this show and speaking at conferences touting the promise of this amazing technology, and then the shit breaks. People look at me, after the past 13 years, people are looking at me like a little bit differently in this space. But yeah, it was a little bit embarrassing. So how are you going to be a part of this responsible wave of DeFi protocols kind of in the future?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I and I think there's twofold. Decentralization is one part of it, which means, once we set up the protocol, I do want to kind of move away from it, and like I do still want to be part of the execution, but I don't want to be the one making day-to-day decisions on the operations of the protocol, because ultimately what I think is best for the protocol and what I think the direction the protocol should go in may not necessarily be the one that our users
Oh,
think it should go in, and frankly the demographics of who might be using the protocol versus me, the interests might not always align as well. But the other part of, damn it, I lost my train of thought,
no,
but
but that's a good point. You said your interest, so the interest of the builder, you and the maintainer, is very different than the interest of the user. And so
yeah.
it used to be in the business relationship, you had like company and then customer. But now you also have like token holder. So token holder kind of is the soft landing, or it's like the ballast. It's the third it's the third like counterbalance, the token holder now. It's a beautiful thing. And what you're saying is that it's not about the person, but power inherently corrupts, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah.
So why even put ourselves in a position of power or put anyone? Because you may have good intentions, Jane, but good intentions are not transferable, but tokens
Exactly.
are. So you can have the yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. I get really excited about it.
Yeah. um But I guess the other part of it, which I also wanted to talk about, was when you talk about responsibility, and I think earlier in our chat, you mentioned something about, DeFi and breaking things, and this is something that I still to this day struggle with, and I go back and forth with our CTO and Brian a lot, is how we should design our product. On the one hand, I want to push, right? Like I want to say, hey, I want to like, we're literally talking about this. We're like, okay, we're doing a lending product. We're starting very simple because we're on a new chain and we just want to cover our bases. And I'm like, hey, like, can we start supporting ecosystem tokens? Can we like help? Like, can we use them as collateral to borrow other things? Just like, I just want to push and I want to make the product as competitive and as aggressive as possible. And one of the responses from my CTO was like, Jane, like, have you like seen the exploits that happened in
Yeah.
DeFi over the past few years? Like Oracle exploits, like, you have one shot at this. And if you mess it up, like basically don't even think about the rest of your roadmap. And I want to tie this back to responsibility to the protocol, because I think it's so true. Like on the one hand, it's all about like innovate, like let's break things. But at the same time, it's like you're actually holding millions of dollars of people's funds. And I can't stress this enough, because I feel like I do get a lot of feedback like, hey, how are you guys innovating? How are you guys like pushing the next frontier? But what people don't talk about is like, okay, well, like, how are you keeping my funds safe?
Yeah.
And this is something I've definitely I don't want to say I've learned the hard way because we haven't quite launched yet, but I've seen other protocols get exploited. And I'm like, I really applaud you guys for really pushing the frontier. But at the same time, like I feel for you guys because, once you get exploited, this is pretty bad. bad place to be in.
Yeah, it's the worst place to be. I mean, but how do you prevent against that? I mean, there's nothing you can do. The old adage with hacking, it's like hackers will always find a way in.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a balance, right? Like obviously auditing is part of it, but there's only so much. Like Starknet is being built on a new language, Cairo, right? And like the language keeps like iterating. And so people who are auditing your code, they're also learning the language at the same time. So I think we have to go slow on a new network. But I think the other part of it is actually, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, is I saw like the platypus finance exploit recently, which was I think I forget what their stable coin was called, but basically they had an exploit recently. And the French police had actually like targeted the hackers and actually ended up arresting them. And this was kind of one of the instances when I saw law enforcement actually come into play with hacks. Um,
Yeah.
and I usually am very not like negative, but I don't have a great impression of regulators or law enforcement because who does in this industry? But at the same time, I do realize the role that law enforcement does need to play in the world of DeFi, in the world of crypto, because sure, like code is king, but in the early days, people are bound to make mistakes, and who's going to help them recoup the funds? Surely some of the exchanges will help them, but how do you eventually penalize, or how do you prevent this kind of behavior from happening? You need to, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm rambling on, but I don't know. I guess like what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, you're right. And I was just reading that article about the platypus finance thing, and I don't have, like you said, it's when we talk about power, anyone who's in a position of power, I'm always weary of. But like you were saying here, when you have law enforcement actually doing something in lockstep with the DeFi protocol and then using that money to reimburse people from a hack, I mean, it sounds like we're getting better. And what's cool about that is the French police probably have crypto experts on their team now, and they have
Yeah.
folks who are willing to like open up and understand and learn. So it's like those governments who have been willing to like communicate with our industry, like the Swiss government, for example, has been involved since day one. There are certain countries that have just really wanted to understand this industry. Their law enforcement understand it the best because they've been around the longest. Like history and time is everything. So there's definitely a lot of that. The the Sam Bankman-Fried way of like getting governments on our side by just donating millions of dollars to politicians is not the best way. The best way, it takes time. And the best way for us to work closely with governments of the future is to start working closely with them now on small things that eventually will end up being big things. And don't forget, people forget it's like there's no like big bad government in a room. These are most people are civil servants. They're just like our friends, or you and I, who work for the regulators, work for the government,
Yeah.
work for the IRS, work for different taxing. They're just our cousins, our friends. So the more they know about Bitcoin and crypto, the more they understand it, but the more they understand the why. Like this whole show, we've been talking about decentralization. We've been talking about the why. We've been talking about fairness, equity. Like that's where we're going back to. And that's why I'm really excited about like if our whole industry was filled with folks like you, we'd be moving in a right direction. Do you think that we're moving in a right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings sometimes. But yes, I think overall we are moving in the right direction. Especially because I mean, you have two spectrums of I don't I don't want to say like people, but on the one hand, you have people who are in it for, I don't know, the shit coins, the
Yeah.
memes, and that's great. That's great for entertainment. But then you have people, in my mind, like Starkware, who are really like cutting out the noise and just care about the tech. And sometimes that's really hardcore for me because I fail to even understand some of the technical details. But I think seeing this side of the spectrum of people makes
Yeah.
me very hopeful that it's when people say crypto, it has such a bad connotation. Like, um, it like at the end of the day, once we push through with blockchain technology, I don't think we should be known as just crypto. I mean, we
Oh,
are like, yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, like we don't, there's no internet people anymore. It's like we're all use the internet.
yeah.
There's no more
And
crypto
actually,
folk.
I was watching one of your podcasts, and I think it was with Ribbon Finance, and I'm actually a user of Ribbon Finance, big
Awesome.
fan by the way. But I think one of the things that your guest said was, don't want to be known as, you know, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but in my mind, I don't want to be known as maybe a protocol built on like 5, 10 years down the line. I don't want to be known as a protocol built on Starknet. I just want to be known as zkLend. So when people come in, I just want to be known as the person who's like, okay, so sorry, I just want the user to know, okay, I'm using this product, rather than think about like, okay, which blockchain am I using?
Yeah, all
Like
that
this
stuff.
crypto. It's like what we said about like Web 1 and Web 2. Like when I go on Facebook, I'm not thinking like, okay, I'm going on this like internet and then I'm connecting.
Yeah.
Like I just think of it as Facebook and I'm using social media.
Yeah, you're not thinking like what content delivery network is Facebook using? Are they on AW? Like we're not thinking about, how some people are like how is Facebook broken up into different modules and how are they operating in the different but you're right. Most people are not. And in the future, all this technology that we're building out uh is going to be the norm. But before that happens, before we get to that point of like critical mass when there's no difference between like a crypto person and then everyone else, before we get there, we're still attracting our industry a certain type of person. In
Yeah.
that person, and we could talk about that, what attracted you and what me and some early people to Bitcoin and to crypto. But I feel like the common denominator is this like we're all hardwired for fairness and connection, right? We all want to be connected. And so you and I and all the other people, we have our skills that we want to be able to use for fairness and equality down the road. We don't really know how to do that, but we all saw Bitcoin and crypto as this like technology that can make the world a better place, like be fair, be equal. And on that note, today is International Women's Day, and the theme of that is embracing equity. Do you feel like our industry is embracing equity enough? Are we doing everything that we can to make everyone feel welcome and that we're all on this level playing field?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the crypto community in general feels more inclusive than a lot of other communities out there, in my
Interesting.
opinion, especially as a woman. And as a woman who's worked in finance as well, I feel that um, people who work in crypto are not as stuck up. And but in terms of being a woman and how that kind of affects the way I see the crypto community is, yes, there's definitely a huge imbalance, right? If you look at most developers, they tend to be men. But I wouldn't say that's because of the crypto community. I would say because in tech right now, there is a large skew towards male developers, and it's only slowly catching up right now. And this is reflective through the crypto community because it's so tech focused. But I would say I mean, I would say compared to a lot of other communities out there, like crypto is just a lot more inclusive. I think people embrace that difference. People embrace that weirdness. And I would say it's obviously not as fringe as it used to be,
Yeah.
but I'm as a woman, I'm very happy to be in this ecosystem. And I tell this to people all the time. It's like crypto's a little weird, but like I love it. It just like lets me be myself.
Yeah, you just said it. It's embracing our weirdness. Like it embraces
Yeah.
like we're all weird in some way or form, and we joined this industry, and it's very like embracing of that. And your status in the industry is really based on what your contributions were. Most of the time, like I had a business partner that we after 3 years we never even like spoke on the phone like barely just because we can do everything over text chat, but I guess it's like it's just a little bit different. You're judged on the quality of your work, and it's a path. It's not perfect, but I'm happy to hear that you say that we're better than other industries and others. But do you go to a lot of conferences?
I try to, but because I'm based in Asia and I'm only getting out. So I'm based in Hong Kong, and today was the first day our mask mandate came like
I
was
saw
removed.
that.
So,
Congratulations.
yes, thank you. So the first day I was able to walk around outside without a mask. Um,
Oh my
so
God.
I'm a little bit behind, and with traveling, as with traveling, I think I'll probably have more opportunity this year.
Have you left Hong
Um,
Kong in a while?
I attended ETCC a while ago, last July. I attended Dev Connect back in April. We'll be looking to. I was actually really keen to attend ETH Denver, but it's just too far of a trek for me.
Yeah.
Um, but any conference recommendations?
ETH Denver is like now, and like as we speak, and I think, and I'm supposed to be speaking on Saturday, but I don't even know it. They kept changing it on me. It's like one of those situations, and I, don't- and so it's all up in the air. But I really want to go to that one too. The one event that I used to go to that I'm probably going to try to go to again this year is the Satoshi Roundtable. Bruce Fenton runs this like great retreat once a year, and I think it's a secret location, but I'll offline I'll give you some details about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Satoshi
So,
Roundtable's the best.
So Charlie, I guess before I forget, I also wanted to plug some women's resources in crypto that has helped me a lot. I was introduced to SheFi a while ago, and SheFi is basically this community to help women, and you don't even need to work in crypto, but to help women kind of achieve crypto literacy or whatever you want to call it. And it's an educational series that can be free if you apply for it.
Oh, this
And
is
they
so
basically
cool.
yeah.
This is so cool. I didn't even know this existed. So shefi.org for the listeners. SHEFI. The check. This is so cool.
Yeah, I totally forgot. I was like, okay, when Charlie finishes his thought, I need to plug SheFi.
Empowering people globally to truly own and build their finances, building opportunities, and value within crypto Web3. This is so cool. Oh, education, experimentation, global community.
Yeah.
I wanna I wanna give SheFi like some free ad space on this show. I think I'm gonna start doing that. Just plug really cool products and services just for the sake of
Yeah.
it. But this is so cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for teaching us all this today, Jane. Thanks for teaching us about ZK rollups and about equality and about why getting into this space is so important in the first place, why what you're building is really important, decentralization. We got to get rid of maximalism, um, but have a lot of fun along the way. And it's good to see like DeFi protocols are going to be like the clear winners in the next year.
Thanks a lot for your time, Charlie. I had a lot of fun.